While I was working as an extension agent in the city of Philadelphia, I would jog in the northern areas of the city, Mount Airy, Chestnut Hill, which was actually very beautiful. The city is known for its horticulture and beautiful botanical gardens and trees. And I used to run past this food co-op, Weaver's Way Food Co-op in Germantown. And I kept saying to myself, I should join sometime. And so one day I was running past, but it would cost money and then hours of my time. And so one day I was running past, and as I was looking at the door, I looked down, and there's a $20 bill on the road. And that was actually the cost of entry of membership. And I looked around, and there was no one around, and the bill was there. So I took the bill and I walked in and I joined. And I actually did my hours and ended up really enjoying that. And actually, that experience, along with my extension agent experience combined, is what got me hired again as an associate editor. So I really was involved in communications, writing profiles. So right off the bat, I got involved on the organic food and farming beat. And right at that time, Meryl Streep and a group called Mothers and Others Against Pesticides came out against an insect growth regulator that they were using on the commercial apple crop called Alar. Well, Alar was kind of the one of the catalysts to actually boost interest in organic right at the time that I joined the natural products industry through New Hope Communications as a writer and an associate editor. So I started covering the organic products industry, and also the natural industry, and just started interviewing and spending time with all the manufacturers, retailers, industry leaders. So that was a real formative time for me as a young professional, writing about everybody in the industry. But even that opportunity to spend time with the likes of some of the retail pioneers that really also established the modern day natural products industry, Sandy Gooch, John Mackey, Anthony Harnett with Bread and Circus in the Northeast, Mark Retzloff and Haas Hassan with Alfalfa's Market in Boulder and Colorado, Terry Dalton, who was leading restauranting and really beautiful natural foods, food service and grocery merchandising down in Miami, Florida. And all these people I spent time in their stores with, photographing, interviewing, and over the years also getting them involved in seminar programming for our trade shows. And over time, they didn't just become mentors, they became friends. So the people that stand out for me in the industry are those that were very formative in my career. Actually, interestingly enough, when I first joined New Hope Network in 1985, the founder, Doug Green, I had to pass a writing test, which they gave me a sheet of notes about this store in Austin, Texas, that suffered a flood, but the community literally and figuratively bailed them out, pun intended. They ended up growing, and their leadership, which included the one of the co-founders and CEO, John Mackey. I ended up passing that writing test, and what I didn't realize is it was about Whole Foods Market, and this is August 1985. So John, I still interact with. He's quite a mentor and a leader, and I see him once a year at least and get to interact with him. And I always joke with him and say, writing about your early work is what got me in the industry, and it's before I even realized the impact of Whole Foods Market. Other mentors, certainly the founder of New Hope Network, Doug Green, who just kind of set me out there and let me interact with all these leaders and actually travel internationally to create all these relationships with initially folks in Europe and also Latin America. Um, and a lot of the folks from Asia that would come to the United States, I would interact with them. I would say that Mark Retzloff, one of the co-founders of the Organic Center and Alfalfa's Markets, and with him, we are also co-founders of Naturally Boulder, which has grown into, I think, 10 different chapters across the country and now in Naturally Network. I still visit with Mark. I go out to his farm, and he continues to be not just a mentor, but he's on my advisory board for my public relations and brand marketing agency, Compass Natural. So there are people that I've known now for going on 40 years, including Sandy Gooch and Harry Letterman, that I stay in regular touch with. They continue to be supportive of my work and our business in promoting natural, organic, sustainable, and regenerative brands and organizations. The founders of the Organic Trade Association. One gentleman I haven't heard from in a while, but he's been on my mind, Tom Harding, the original president or one of the early presidents and co-founders of the Organic Trade Association, who was my mentor for many, many years. So, Tom, I send my love and my greetings out to you. I have many, many mentors out there. To me, they're all teachers. And hopefully, I'm in a position where through my writing, my interaction, my advocacy, I can also help educate. And that's been our approach through Compass Natural is while we write the stories of the founders and the brands, the benefits of the value, I would say, of organic food and farming. We're out there doing what I call informational educational marketing, really educate consumers about, well, when you look at USDA testing and you see that there are at least a dozen toxic synthetic pesticide residues on a conventional apple that you can't wash off. Well, it's the organic apple a day that keeps the doctor away at this point in time. Well, I was hired by New Hope Network. Again, it really is the communications and trade show company, kind of the early chamber of commerce that complemented the trade associations out there. But as a private company, it really brought a level of professionalism to the trade magazines that served the industry. It really coalesced this new emerging modern day full service retailer, not just health food stores. And it actually really professionalized the trade shows serving the natural and organic and nutritional dietary supplements market. Before then, it had been one show sponsored by the original trade association serving the dietary supplement side. But a lot of the food companies, this gave them a real place in the industry. I came on, I think, in the fifth year of the West Coast show, Natural Products Expo West, which is now the world's largest natural and organic products show. I mean, people from, pre-pandemic, it was close to 90,000 people. Now I think they're back up to about 75, 80,000 people attending, more than 3,000 exhibit booths, et cetera. So that really started coalescing the industry. And I was hired when Doug and New Hope launched the first Natural Products Expo East in 1985. So it was a bit of a wave. He had launched a consumer magazine that was given away through retailers called Delicious. It was a big year of expansion for the industry and also for New Hope. Within a year, I was promoted to editor of the Natural Foods Merchandiser, which is and was the leading trade magazine serving the natural products industry. And then I was the director of all the educational programming for the Natural Products Expo West and East. My one fond memory, or at least ironic memory, is I was. And with our editorial team and the entire New Hope team, we would try to identify trendsetters, keynote speakers. Dr. Bland was an early keynote speaker. When Dr. Andrew Weil was first coming on the scene as a medical doctor, starting to espouse and advocate for holistic medicine, we actually brought him in as our opening keynote speaker. And I was very excited because I could see this guy was emerging. Um, about a dozen people came to his talk, and I was mortified because nobody had really heard about him. A year later, he was internationally renowned with his books. And, so we were just a little bit ahead of our time. Interestingly enough, it's like I think the industry is a benefactor and also a victim of its own success. We are the innovators, we are the disruptors, and this is something that's been going on over 100 years. I mean, actually, the natural foods industry and the conventional foods industry both got their start. And of all places, one of the epicenters, one of the birthplaces was Battle Creek, Michigan. You had Kellogg, who opened the sanitarium. It was like the place all the celebrities of the day went to clean out their systems and eat the very first health foods. I mean, Kellogg invented cornflakes. It was one of the very first health foods. He invented peanut butter. It was one of the very first health foods. He was actually the founder of the Soy Foods Association of America. The health food industry, owes a lot to Kellogg. At the same time, Post comes in with his grape nuts. It was the cereal wars. Believe it or not, boxed cereals were the first convenience foods, but they were also considered health foods, but also entrepreneurs that flocked to Battle Creek. This was all driven by the Seventh-day Adventists. They also saw the gold rush of cereal, and so Post became the first food entrepreneur millionaire pre-income tax. There's a book called Cerealizing America, nonfiction, that tracks all this history back to the Seventh-day Adventists, Kellogg and Post, Battle Creek, Michigan. And from there, really, this whole mainstream conventional food industry, but also the health food industry, kind of grew. Cut to, the 50s. You have Lindbergh, you have the Isley family here in Denver, you have Jack LaLanne, you have Gaylord Hauser, you have folks that influenced Sandy Gooch now. And so you had these health food stores, and you had kind of health foods and vitamins and brewer's yeast. I mean, and this is starting to be a reaction to World War II. Now we're starting to see these like pesticides come on the market. So, now you're having a reaction, early reaction. The founders of the organic food movement in the 1940s, it's not a coincidence. It was in the 40s. That's when these new emerging toxic synthetic modern day pesticides come on the scene. The early pioneers like Rodale, like Sir Albert Howard, and others start seeing what it's doing to the environment. Cut to Rachel Carson, 1960. Now she starts influencing the hippies with her Silent Spring, right? So now the hippies, they start branching out from the college co-ops, start opening up like the early natural food stores, the early days of granola and crunch and wooden shelves. Now you have Sandy Gooch and her peers in the late 70s and early 80s starting to create like these really cool early full service like natural food supermarkets. And that group really helped each other in the 80s grow. In the 90s, you had Whole Foods actually emerge as the one who starts acquiring all these other regional chains that had a half a dozen, 8, 10 stores they were growing independently. Now you have the industry starting to consolidate in the late 80s and early 90s. You start having bigger food companies start to buy into natural food brands like Smuckers bought Knudsen Juices in the late 80s, one of the early acquisitions. And then, of course, they got Santa Cruz Naturals. And then there was a flood of the mainstream food companies purchasing the top brands. So today, there are very few independently owned leading national natural food brands. Most of them are now owned by mainstream food companies like Mondelez or General Mills or others. And I mean, part of it is the whole investment thing, the growth of the industry, founders, early investors wanting an exit strategy. So again, there are those that benefit from the growth of the industry. Wall Street came in the mid 90s. You started to see a number of leading brands now going public. In the early to late 90s, there was a whole flush of companies that went public and are publicly traded today. You had venture capital come in, but of course, for an industry to grow, you need access to capital markets. You need this for an industry to grow. I once heard Wes Jackson, one of the legendary organic farmers, say at EcoFarm Conference, it always stuck with me. He said, we can't be this group of organic elitists orbiting a polluted planet. We have to get everybody or as much awareness about organic as we can, limit as much of the pollution to environment as we can. Now it becomes even more important because it all is now tied in with climate change. So leading into the future, our industry and investment in it and growth in it, if we can get these big companies to see this is worth the investment versus their GMO, toxic pesticide, tech-driven food production, that is going to help solve some of these environmental problems that we're facing. But it has to be economically viable, as always, for these things to change. Moving forward, I think with the higher costs that we're going to see with this pesticide and chemical driven agriculture system, I think you're going to see regenerative and organic emerge as better for you, better for people, better for animals, better for the environment, better for the planet. I'm not saying that being altruistic. We get the question a lot, can organic feed the world? Well, if you look at data from the Organic Center, if you look at data from the Rodale Institute and others, in times of drought, organic soils actually retain moisture significantly better than soils that have been drained. And also in times of flood, they hold water better and you just don't erode the top layer of topsoil. So every time in the winter you go out and you see a bare farm field that's carbon out into the environment, there should be some cover crop on there. That's regenerative. My favorite part of my career. It's had some real highlights. I've loved the international work over the years. I am a complete advocate for New Hope Network and its work in bringing the industry together still to this day. And it was very formative and allowed me to meet so many people in this industry, working with Arrowhead Mills in the 90s and learning real sales at shelf level, with the emerging retailers of the day and the independent retailers. And I still apply that to clients today, working with indie retailers. And I love that very much. They're still out there, that whole community, as well as I'm an advocate for the Whole Foods markets of the world because, they are the ones bringing and educating. Um, mainstream consumers about the benefits of natural and organic. Working with the Organic Center, which is now a part of the Organic Trade Association. I'm working with the international organic industry, working with the late, great Ronnie Cummins when he launched Regeneration International, the first to advocate for regenerative agriculture. We actually launched a press conference in Washington, D.C., that we got Governor Jared Polis to attend, other politicians and policymakers. We spent 2 weeks in Paris at COP21, which was the very first time that agriculture was mentioned in the United Nations Charter in relation to climate change. And France launched the 1 per 1,000 initiative, which relates to carbon sequestration, because interestingly enough, when you rebuild soils and you actually like compost and you put organic matter to rebuild your organic soils like organic farmers do, it's fundamental. You're actually capturing carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it back in the soil. So organic farming, if we increase the acreage of organic farming, it would literally have a major impact on carbon sequestration around the world, getting it out of our atmosphere and back where it belongs, into the soil, out of our oceans, out of the atmosphere, back into the soil where it belongs. The way we've been farming has literally been releasing carbon from the soil into the atmosphere. That speaks to a lot of the history of where we are today. And I would say that the pandemic and the inflation and the long tail of the effects on the supply chains, traditional supply chains, have affected everything. And they've certainly affected the natural and organic products channel. Investors, I think, were really bullish on plant-based foods. You've seen that cool a bit. So the industry is really poised, I think, for a lot more innovation going forward. We need the investors to come back, and I think they are. I just actually, believe it or not, we spoke a lot of my involvement with New Hope. Well, in 1993, I moved on from New Hope. I joined at the time the leading organic food brand in the mid 90s was Arrowhead Mills. It became a part of the Hanes Celestial Group. The brand is still out there in a more limited way. But today now, I think we're seeing New Hope actually engaged my agency to help them produce this new concept show called Newtopia Now. It was held in August in Denver, and it kind of equalized the playing field by the way it had its layout of booths. It wasn't as expensive an endeavor as the Natural Products Expo West, where some brands are compelled to, spend $100,000 on like an island castle booth. So it just said, we're not going to do those. Come in. It's all equal for everybody. We have more affordable ways to go. So that actually invited a lot of young, innovative, entrepreneurial brands to the table. We ended up following and tracking 10 of them, which was really kind of fun because really all young people, people of color, different ethnic backgrounds, women entrepreneurs, husband and wife entrepreneurs that you can read about in New Hope. Look for Newtopia Now if you go to newhope.com. But I was very excited as a veteran, just tracking the passion of these new entrepreneurs in the industry. And I think they're bringing a lot of future innovation. And I'm hoping, again, the investment markets really come back and embrace that, because certainly the big supermarkets, the large food companies, the multinationals, they are looking at this market for innovation. This is where it's happening. It has happened historically it continues to happen moving forward. People who want to make positive change in people's health, in the way we produce our food, the way we grow our food, the impact food has on our environment and our society. And so there are a lot of heroes in this natural products industry that were driven by their own passions, many driven by their own health issues. But once you start realizing that, food and botanicals and herbs and these natural traditional ways, are really powerful medicines. Um, Again, I'm going to go back to if you think organic food is expensive, try healthcare. You either pay the farmer or you pay the doctor.